Oh, and Samantha's here too. Okay, so I have two live guests today, and Ralph and Ellen. Welcome. So I'm really excited. We're going to be talking. What we're discussing today is related to Hanukkah, and the information I'm going to share with you, I've been wanting to know for years and years and years. And now that I prepared it, it's sunk in a little bit. So I'm so excited to share it with you. I think this is every year I read it again, and it changes my entire understanding of view of the Hanukkah story. And it makes me realize how in school you learn Hanukkah, Kafei Kislev, they rested from the war. And like, you think that's it. You think it's a little war. They rested, they won. But there's so much more to the story. And the more we understand it and know, and especially if we know where it took place, and fortunately for us, it took place in Eress Israel, and I'm going to show you today where it took place, the better our understanding will be and the appreciation of the holiday. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And we are starting out looking at a street called Rechava Hashmonaim. In Israel, Hanukkah is something that is thought about not just on Kafei Kislev, I would say the whole year, because imagine you say, I live on Hashmonaim Street, you automatically connect back to Hanukkah. And in the community, in a lot of communities, but I know for a fact of Efrat, where there's a lot of Syrian families, the streets in that area, a lot of them are named, connected to the Hanukkah story. We'll see why later on, why they're specifically. You have, I think they have a street called Zet Shemin or Shemin Zayit, and connected to the story. So the overall question I want to ask ourselves this week is, how can our knowledge of history enrich our identities? And I'm going to give you knowledge of history of the Hanukkah story. So I have a few goals, inner goals within that. One is I'd like to tour Israel, with the focus being following the battles of the Hashmonaim. One of the fantastic things about Israel is you could go so many times, and every time I have a new focus. When I was in the tour guiding course, we went to Jerusalem, the old city, at least 9 times, from 6 in the morning to 6 at night. And every single time is a focus on a different time period. And you can travel the whole Israel that way through a different lens and always add more layers of knowledge to yourself. And we're also going to do a highlight on the Maccabim brothers. Usually we're familiar with Yehuda. The other brothers also have great stories, so we're going to be mentioning them as well. Okay. Maccabim brothers. First question I want to start with is, where do we learn about the Maccabim? We learn about the Maccabim from 2 books. One is Sefer Maccabim Aleph, and the other one is Sefer Maccabim Bet. Now, these books are not part of the Tanakh, which is why most of us are not familiar with them. I know I wasn't really familiar with them until I started investigating Hanukkah. They're also not so accessible. The Sefer Maccabim Aleph was originally written in Hebrew, so that means we could understand that. And Maccabim Bet was written in Greek, which is not accessible. And the way a lot of this information was made more accessible is through this book. There's a book called Megillat Hanukkah, or the Hanukkah Scroll, was translated into English, written by Dr. Chagi Ben Artzi, who's pictured to the right. And this book, what he did is he took Sefer Maccabim and he rewrote it in very easy, digestible Hebrew and English. And if you want to get a full knowledge of the Hanukkah story and the battles, it's very short. It's a pamphlet. And I know a few families that have a custom. There's 8 chapters. Every night they read a different chapter of the book. And it's really a great thing. I think it's available in Brooklyn. I'm not sure, but it's really, really great book. And this entire Zoom is based on this book, and also on YouTube. Chagi Ben Artzi has a lot of videos, so it's also based on his videos as well. And the pictures, most of them are taken from his videos. So that's where it is. Okay. So, this is especially exciting since Ellen is on the class, because we are going to start by mentioning the city of Modiin. Ellen's daughter Janice lives in Modiin, and there are also a bunch of Syrian families that live there. And Modiin, if we even know that it's a city in Israel, maybe it's because we know people that live there. It's near Jerusalem, near Tel Aviv, and it's also the start of the Merit of the Hashmonaim. The way the whole story started is, we know Antiochus and the Gezerot, and it was hard for the Jews to have their identity strongly, mostly because of the Mityavnim, because of the Jews that would be like the Greeks. And now, where do I stand as a Jewish person? How much of the Greek culture can I take into my identity? And it got to a point where the Jews said, that's it. We can't take in all of this. This is not who we are. And in the city of Modiin, Matityahu was with his sons. And the Greeks came one day and they built a mizbeach. On the right, you see a picture of a mizbeach, and they put a huge statue of Zeus there. And they knew Matityahu was the leader, so they went up to him and they said, Matityahu, we want you to give a korban to, and Zeus was right there, and they knew if Matityahu did it, then it would help calm things down, and people look up to him. And he refused. And then they took another random Joe, and he bows down to the statue twice, and he starts doing this, and all this is written in Sefer Maccabim. And Matityahu kills him. He kills the Greeks that are right there. And that's how the rebellion starts, from that quick act. Now, they leave Modiin and they run to the hills of Bet El. A few weeks ago, we spoke about Bet El as the site where Yaakov had his dream. Another layer I could have spoken about was where the Hashmonaim, their camp is, where they're hiding, where they're staying. And before that, I just want to mention something. One of the ideas that I'm going to mention a few times throughout this class is we're going to see how connected the Maccabim and the Hashmonaim were to the history. And the more we know, the more fighting power gives you a knowledge of who you are. So I just want to share with you, this is from Chagi's book, Megillat Hanuka. Right before Matityahu was about to die, and in the book it says that when they were living in the hills of Bet El, it's hard conditions, and he got weak and he got old. And he's speaking to his sons and he tells them, remember the Ma'asim of your Avot, remember Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and look at the other names that he mentions, Moshe, Pinchas, Yeshua, Kalev, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. And something I ask myself is, do I know who all these people are? Because these are names that Matityahu is mentioning to his sons to give them chizuk. And he tells them, Hitbonenu b'chol haderot v'limdu mehem. Think about all the generations and learn from them, because, and this is beautiful, En lefached me'adam rasha, gam hu chazak me'ayem. There's no reason to be afraid of a person that's a rasha, even if he's strong and threatening. Our fathers trusted in God and he saved them. And he tells them the same thing. Be faithful to God, because that is the only way that you're going to be successful and win. So that those are his parting words, and we're able to read them, and they stand true today. So something which is really going to be critical in order to understand the battles of the Hashmonaim and how they won is this picture you see right before you. These are Greek soldiers fighting. Oh, I thought I wrote the name. So the way that they would fight, you see that they all grouped together and had these long spears. It's called a phalanx. And it worked for them, because if other nations were coming to fight, how could you get to a single soldier? You can't get to anyone. They're completely protected. So this is how they fought. And we're going to see how that doesn't work for them in Eress Israel, especially the way Yehuda planned it. Yehuda was an amazing general. So over here, this is a Nahal, a wadi in Arabic called Wadi Haramiyah. And actually, if any of you have ever been to Shiloh, where the Mishkan stood, you pass through this area and notice how it's very, very narrow. And on either side are two mountains. So I outlined it in red to make it easier. Now, what happens? So on the south, we have Yehuda and his soldiers. And Matityahu appointed Yehuda to be in charge. And now you have the Greeks, they're up north and they're coming through. Now, it's very, very narrow between the two mountains. So they can't come in their phalanx form. They have to go one by one, which they're not used to, because now they're not protected. They don't know how to fight. And what does Yehuda do? This is the first battle. He has the soldiers all hiding in the mountains. He sees the Greeks coming and they completely ambush them and attack them and kill them. And they're very successful from the tactic of Yehuda saying, well, how do they fight? Where could we have them squeezed in? And let's attack them. And every battle that Yehuda fought, the Jewish people saw that he was successful and saw that he was winning, and he got more and more and more soldiers, still much less than the Greeks. And we're going to speak in a little while about numbers. We always hear Ma'atim neged Rabim, small versus a lot. But what were the actual numbers? And we know this because we have this info in Sefer Maccabim. This is a really fun fact. So Apollonius, he was the general. Every battle had almost a new general, because the Jews kept winning. So Antiochus said, we need a better general and a stronger one and a more experienced one. So the Greek in charge of this battle, his name was Apollonius, and Yehuda killed him. And what Yehuda did is he took his sword and he used Apollonius' sword for the rest of the battles. Now, this might remind you of something. This might remind you of David and Goliath, because David, he killed Goliath, the giant. And then later on, when he was running away from Shaul, he goes to Achimelech, and David has nothing when he's running away. And he says, do you have cherev or chanit? Because I didn't take anything. And it says, Vayomer HaKohen, cherev Goliath HaPelishtia shehikita be'emek Ayalon. He says, I have the sword of Goliath. Tikach lecha. And he takes it. And David says, En kamot and en ale. So I could only imagine that Yehuda, in taking Apollonius' sword, is thinking back to David HaMelech and David taking Goliath's sword. And I really do think he thought of this, because we're going to see later on the speeches that Yehuda would give to his soldiers. And every time I read it, I get surprised, because when I think about Yehuda Maccabim, I think of a fighter. I don't think of the spiritual side to him and him being connected to God. I mean, I guess you could say obviously he's connected to God, because the Jews fighting are the Jews that said we are protecting our identities. But I don't necessarily, when I think of this army general, tough tactics, I don't think of his spiritual side and connection to God. And we're going to see that Yehuda had a really, really strong one. The next battle that took place, so altogether, Yehuda HaMaccabi fought 8 battles, and then he was killed in the 8th battle, and then his brothers took over. And the story of Hanukkah happened in between the battles, so we're gonna see that in a little while. So the next battle took place in an area called Bet Horon. I always like showing Jerusalem as my center. Jerusalem is a 25-minute drive, and over here is Modiin, where we said that the rebellion started. And now we have a new general named Sidon, and he's sent from Yafa to go to Bet Horon to now go and fight. And here is a picture of Chagi ben Arsi. It's a snapshot from his video. And here is another really cool tactic. And being in Israel helps you understand it, because the topography of Israel, Yehuda really used to his advantage. Over here, you have this hill. And this community is the community of Bet Horon. And what Yehuda did is he had his soldiers hide on the hill. And they had a great view, like where the houses are, that's where they were hiding. And they had a great view of the Greeks coming. Here, where you see my mouse, like over here where the blue is, this is where Yehuda and his soldiers were coming. And then along this road over here, this is where the Greeks were coming. Now, Yehuda has an advantage. They're hiding. Nobody could see them. And then the advantage works a little bit to the disadvantage, because now the Jewish people are seeing the Greeks coming, and they get very afraid, because they're outnumbered and they think they're going to lose. And there's nothing worse than low morale, because if you think you're going to lose, you're going to lose. And Yehuda sees that his soldiers are afraid. And he tells them, and this is also taken from Megillat Hanukkah, En Elohim me'atzor le'hoshia berav u'mat. God could save whether it's a few people or whether it's a lot of people. And then he tells them, Alachnu nechamim be'adamenu be'toratenu. We're fighting for our nation, for our Torah. The God of our father is not going to leave us. And it says, when Yehuda finished speaking, it did the trick, and they feel very strong. And they're now falling on their enemies, and they were successful. And every time I learn battle stories, whether it's the Chashmonaim, which is not modern, but it's more modern than David, let's say in the Tanakh, I always think that if all the soldiers in the Israeli army knew these pesukim and knew these stories, how much chizuk it would give them. And a lot of times I used to think, oh, they speak Hebrew, of course they know it. And then when I started going around Israel, I would always see soldiers on tours and in groups, because some soldiers, if you grow up religious, then you might know it more. But if you don't, they really don't know it. And the Israeli army knows how inspiring these stories are and how important they are. So they teach the soldiers. So if you ever see a group of soldiers walking around, they could be on tour. And this is so I mentioned earlier that Yehuda had a great sense of Tanakh, because the line that he uses is exactly what Yonatan told one of his Ne'arim. Shaul had a son, Yonatan, and Yonatan was going to battle the Pelishtim, and he tells his Nad, the young boy that's with him, don't be afraid, because for God, it doesn't matter whether there's a lot of people or little people, it's all the same to him. And I remind that to myself today too, because when you look at all the enemies, countries around us, and the millions and millions of people, you think like, how are we going to beat them? But for God, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many people there are. Now, this is another reference. If any of you are familiar with Sefer Yoshua, In the same place, Bet Horon, where the battle is taking place, the Navi tells us that when Yeshua is fighting the battle, Hashem helped him with a huge miracle, and these huge rocks fell down from the sky and killed people. A very nice fun fact is there are 5 places, not all in Israel, some are in Jordan, which used to be part of Israel, where you can actually say this beracha, and one of those places is Bet Horon, where the battle took place with Yehuda Maccabim, and where the big stones fell from the sky. And another place is where Bnei Israel crossed the Yarden. We know exactly where it is today. You could also say that beracha. So it's a fun fact and amazing that in Israel you have opportunities to say berachot that you could say nowhere else in the world. Now, I want to talk to you about another battle. This one is really, really smart planning of Yehuda. And Chagi mentioned in his video that in army school, they teach about this battle because it was great on so many levels. So first I want to show you, we have the Greek camp over here. They're in a place called Emek Ayalon. And if you could take the new train from Jerusalem to the airport or vice versa, you pass by Emek Ayalon, you could see it. You have the Greeks are camping out over there in a place called Emmaus. And the Jews are by Hare Betel. Now, the Greeks say, let's go and surprise the Jews. They don't know we're coming. It's hard. It's not like today we have cameras everywhere. So they start their way up. And Yehuda Maccabim is a great general. And he has people standing on different mountaintops. And he sees that the camp is coming close. So he says, I'm not going to stay and wait for them. I'm going to go somewhere else. So he goes to a place called Nabi Samuel or Mitzpah, which we're going to speak about in a minute. But I just want to, here's zoomed in more. We have the Greeks going all the way up this way towards Bet-El. And we have the Jews that moved to Mitzpah. Yehuda and the army, they moved. Now, I said I'm going to mention numbers just to understand. And the numbers on both sides kept increasing with each battle. The Greeks had 40,000 soldiers and 7,000 horsemen, and the Jews had 3,000 soldiers. That is a crazy, crazy comparison. And the Jews were successful. One, Yehuda Maccabim was a great general, had great plans. But more than that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave tremendous help to the Maccabim, and they were able to win. So this is just to give us perspective about how small the odds are. And they go to Mitzpah because they're not going to sit and wait for the soldiers. And Mitzpah was a place. I also I gave a Zoom on it connected to Rosh Hashanah. So if anyone was not in the class and wants to know more information, they could find it on YouTube. So Yehuda, he gathers the people. And it says it's a place Sheba nahagu Yehudim litpalel me'az yamav shel Shemuel Hanavi. Yehuda knows where is there a tradition to pray. I want to connect back to the tefillah of Shemuel Hanavi when right before the battle of the Pelishtim, they're praying there. I want to connect to that. And in the mitzvah, they're praying, they're reading the Torah, they're blowing chatzotzrot. And now Yehuda does something which is not. We don't have any example of it happening anywhere in Tanakh, except for, this isn't in Tanakh, but it's, we see an example of it happening. What does Yehuda do? The Torah says that if someone built a house or was engaged to a woman or had a vineyard or is afraid, he doesn't have to fight in a Mechamed Reshut because we want to give him the opportunities to do these things. And if he's afraid, we said if your morale is low, what kind of great soldier are you going to be? So Yehuda tells these people, if you built a new house, if you're engaged newly to a woman and you didn't yet marry her, if you're afraid, you could go home. You could go, you're free. You don't have to fight. And the fact that we see Yehuda, he's in the midst of battles and planning, fulfilling the mitzvot of the Torah really shows how connected he was to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how he knew that that's where his success came from. So now that he built up their morale in Mitzpah, he continues on and he has a plan. So he said the Greek camp is the red. They're going all the way up to Hare Betel, and Yehuda and friends and the camp, they go now to Emek Ayalon, where the Greeks are. Now they come early in the morning. All the Greeks are sleeping. Even the watchmen are sleeping, and they attack them. And they attack them. Yehuda divides his camp into 3 different sides. I know here you see 3. He makes his brother in charge of different divisions. His brother is in charge of different divisions. He's also in charge of one. And right in the middle of arrows is where the Greek camps were, and Yehuda attacks. And they burn the whole camp. And the battle cry is, Lelokim HaYeshua. The victory comes from God. And if he says, when I say this battle cry, it means everyone go attack at the same time. Could you imagine if this is the battle cry, if they make noise when they're fighting the Israeli army, how it connects you straight to God. And Yehuda is reminding them again and again, our power to win is coming from God. And we see in every step that Yehuda does how he's connected to God. Then they also, another halacha that he's keeping is he doesn't surround them from four sides. And there is a halacha that when you're fighting against the city, and here I quoted a few, you can't, this is Rambam Mechot Melachim, you can't surround it from four sides, only from three, because you need to give them a way to run away. And Yehuda Maccabi is following that halacha. Here is what he approached, because it's the camp of the Greeks. He burns it. Now, in the meantime, we have the soldiers that went to surprise Yehuda Maccabi. They realize they're not there in Harabetia, so they start coming back. And all of a sudden, they see that the camp is on fire, and they start running away. And then Yehuda Maccabi and the army, they start running after them. So they burn the camp. Now they're running after the people. And after that, a beautiful thing happens. It's Shabbat. And they take in Shabbat among the burnt tents of the Yevanim. And I like thinking, like, how nice must it have been for them? They're fighting hard, and now it's Shabbat, and they're keeping Shabbat, which I think is also a really unique aspect of the story. Now, there's 8 battles. We're not going to focus on all of them, on a few of them. I just want to mention after this battle, we have one at a place called Bet Sur, because right after that, we have the story of Hanukkah. So we had 4 battles of Yehuda Maccabi, then the story of Hanukkah, which is they finally come to Yerushalayim, and they're able, and like we learn in school, that they want to light the menorah. Now, there was no menorah. The golden menorah that I'm picturing was not there. So according to Sefer Maccabim, they lit spears of iron, and this is what you see pictured here. This picture is from Machon HaMikdash, and they find the oil enough for one day, but lasted 8 days. And for the Yehudim fighting so hard to have a miracle like this happen to them, they take it as a sign. They say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on our side. He's happy with what we're doing. And finally they could rest. Now, I would hope, and is this happily ever after? Now, finally they won, they could rest. This is not happily ever after, not even close. After these 4 battles, Yehuda Maccabi continues fighting, because the Greeks are even more fired up, and even more than the Greeks are fired up, and this really is, it's like horrible, the Mityavnim, the Greeks, the Jews that become like Greeks, they're the ones that they go to the Greeks, they say, come on, the Jews are going to rebel against you. They're the ones that are inciting them, really. So now Yehuda Maccabi, he goes to another area of Israel called Bet Zechariah, and we know where that is today. So I mentioned Efrat, how it has streets named after the Hashmonaim. There's an area in Israel, okay, I want to show you here, called Gush Etzion. If you look down at the bottom where we have the name Elazar, we have Efrat, Alon Shvut, Kfar Etzion. There's also a lot of people from the Syrian community living in Efrat. This whole area at the bottom is where the battle of the Hashmonaim is taking place. So I want to go back a minute. Now, something interesting happens in this battle. I want you to notice the elephants pictured. In the previous battles, there were horses. Now, the Greeks say, we need to step it up a notch, and they bring elephants. Yehuda decides to put his brother Elazar in charge of this battle. He says, the general Lysias is going to be here, and he's going to be on the most extravagant, beautiful elephant, the most protected elephant. I want you to go straight for him, because if you go straight for the general and he falls, then everyone, their morale is going to go down and we're going to win. So Elazar says, no problem. He takes this upon himself, and he looks for the most decorated elephant and the most protected elephant, and he takes the spear, he stabs the elephant. Unfortunately, the elephant falls down and crushes Elazar underneath him. And even more unfortunately, it was not even the general, it was just some other high-ranking official. Now, that battle took place in, we said, the Gush Etzion area, and to commemorate this, there is a yishuv, a settlement called Elazar, named after Elazar HaMaccabi, and that, which I said it like opening in the class, that in Israel, we think about the Hashmonaim, the story of Hanukkah, much more than just Hanukkah. If you live in a yishuv called Elazar, and someone asks you, who's Elazar? You think Elazar HaMaccabi, and then you think of the story, and you connect it to all the ideas that's happening. So that's Elazar. And here, just so we know how far from Yerushalayim, there was traffic at the hour that I checked, but it's about 45 minutes, maybe even less, to the Yeshuv of Elazar, named after Elazar Maccabim. Now, very fortunate thing that happens. So first, the unfortunate part, we're losing the battle. Elazar is killed. Yehuda starts heading towards Jerusalem to be inside the wall so they could protect him. And Lysias, now he's following, and they do a siege around Jerusalem, and Yehuda's inside, and they're not winning. And then Lysias gets word that Antiochus was killed. And what does that mean for him? Antiochus is killed. I'm not staying here. I'm going back home because I want to vie for power. I want to be the next person in charge. So it's really a gift from God that Yehuda didn't know where he was going to turn. And God causes this change of politics for Lysias to go back home, and Yerushalayim is saved and is successful into this battle. And if we connect it to modern day, at the end of the day, politics on a grand scale, even on a small scale, God is behind the scenes. So we don't know how things are going to play out, but we see how God has his hand in it and he has his plan. So this is really great for Yehuda HaMaccabim. Now we have battle 6 and 7, successful for Yehuda. Now the last battle was, again, this is where it started, around the hills of Bet El. And Yehuda Maccabim loses because this time the general in charge, he kind of gives Yehuda a taste of his own medicine, and he divides his camp up into two. The red is the Greeks and the blue is the Jews. Now the Greeks are coming towards the Jews, and the Jews start running after them, and they're successful and they're winning, except they didn't know that the camp of the Greeks was divided into two. Now we see how the Jewish people are stuck in the middle, and they lose the battle, and Yehuda Maccabim is killed. And it completely shoots the morale of the Jewish people, because beforehand, Yehuda is successful, they're winning, the Beit HaMikdash was cleansed, and now Yehuda is killed and they lost the battle. Now what? Because we can't just end. Now, there were two goals in all of this. One is, of course, we want the Beit HaMikdash to be purified. We want to light the menorah. We don't want a big statue of Zeus there. But the larger goal was, we want to rule ourselves. We don't want to be under the rule of the Yavanim, have to do what they say. We want to be an independent state. And Yehuda was very successful in helping bring close the goal of being Yerushalayim and being the Beit HaMikdash, and also in getting rid of a lot of the Greeks. However, he was not successful in creating an independent state because he didn't do it. But fortunately for us, his amazing brothers they stepped up to the plate. But right now that everyone is losing, the Jews run to caves. What caves? Actually, the caves are nearby where I'm currently. I'm currently in a town in Israel called Maccabim, which is next to an area called Tekoa. Tekoa is right over here on the map. And this is what it looks like. So notice that there's some caves, and look how steep it is. Yonatan and Yochanan and Shimon, the remaining brothers, they run away with their wives and kids to these caves. It is hard to live in a cave, and it's tough conditions for everyone, but especially for women and children. And Yonatan decides that they can't have the women and children living in this cave, and even to climb up to it, to climb down to it is very hard and it's very steep. So they decide they're going to send the women and children to the Nabateans, who are on the other side of the Dead Sea, the Jordan area. There was peace between Yehuda Maccabim and them, because when Yehuda was successful in winning, everyone wants to make peace with him. So he sends the women and children with his brother Yochanan, and unfortunately the Nabatim don't keep the end of the deal, and they kill the women and children. And now they're in the caves and they're mourning. They're mourning for the loss of Yehuda Maccabim and for the Jewish people losing, and they're mourning for their women and children that were just killed. They're mourning for Yochanan that was just killed, and Jewish history could have ended right there. However, Yonatan decides he is going to get up and he's going to fight. He's going to do something, because what he learned from his brother Yehuda, what he learned from Matityahu, what he learned from the Tanakh is, we keep fighting and we keep going. We're fighting for something we believe in. We're fighting for the Jewish people. Let's keep going. And he ends up going to the Nabatim when there's a wedding of one of the important officials, and he ends up killing them as revenge. And when he does that, he actually gains a lot of popularity, and Jews start joining him. Yonatan is in these caves of Tekoa for 3 years, and the Greeks come to fight them, but the Greeks are not successful. And eventually what happens is the Greeks give up and they say, okay, you won, we're not going to keep killing you, let's make peace. And Yonatan goes back to Yerushalayim, and he actually becomes the Kohen Gadol. And things are really, really great for the Jewish people. They're able to go to the Beit HaMikdash, and they have the upper hand. Yonatan makes a very big political mistake. He makes peace with this man named Trifon. What's happening right now on the Greek side is there's battles of power, who's going to be in charge. The generals are all fighting, and he makes peace with someone named Trifon, and then Trifon ends up backstabbing him and killing him. So no more Yonatan. And now what's going to happen to the Jewish people? So Yonatan was the one we focused on in Tekoa, but then Shimon takes over, and he's the last brother of the Maccabim. And Shimon decides that we don't just want Yerushalayim, we want to expand Israel. And he goes to Yaffo, which is right by Tel Aviv. Well, today, like if you're landing in Israel, it'll say on the ticket Tel Aviv, Yaffo. It's considered almost the same place because they're so close. And then the Greeks, the Antiochus VII, Antiochus IV is the main Antiochus of the story. Now up to the 7th, he tells Shimon, don't be here. Have Yerushalayim, don't be here. The Jewish people are not here. This is not your land. And Shimon gives a fantastic, fantastic response. He says, so again, let me move all this. We didn't take a foreign land. This is the land of our forefathers. And we are not taking something that doesn't belong to us. And I think Shimon's words, it would be incredible if every single person in the Jewish people today could say, Eress Israel is ours. It's not foreign land that we need to be apologetic or maybe not take. Eress Israel is ours. And Shimon is so sure about it. He says, it's ours. I'm not taking Yaffo. It belongs to us. And he is successful. And Shimon is able to do something that none of his brothers previously were able to do. However, he was building upon them. If it was not for the successes of his brothers, or even the losses of them, but it was all a step in this direction, which was what was finally able to happen under Shimon HaMaccabee, that we have independent Jewish state under Shimon. And right now, Eress Israel, we rule ourselves. We have a Jewish government. We are in control. The last time in history that the Jews were in control over Eress Israel was the Hashmonaim. Because after the Hashmonaim, it was all downhill. It was all other nations. And again, today in Israel, we are very fortunate that we're ruling ourselves. And I want you guys to look at this map. Look at how much Eress Israel extended under the Hashmonaim. You see the different colors based on the ruler. So this color over here is Yehuda. The colors are actually very similar. They should have done like red, blue, green. But continuing into the Hashmonaim is the Hashmonaim dynasty of his sons. Now, a lot of people know that the Hashmonaim eventually, they left the ways of the Torah. We know Matityahu and his 5 sons did follow the ways of the Torah. And later on, they didn't. And something we could learn from this whole story, and if we go back to Matityahu's opening speech, or even the other speeches of the brothers, is that the only way that we're going to be successful is if we follow the Torah. Following the Torah and the mitzvot is what is giving us the upper hand. And the second, the Hashmonaim, the sons, not the 5, but the continuing ones, forgot that, then there was a rift and fighting, and then eventually the Romans are the next ones to take over. So that is something we want to learn based on what didn't happen. They forgot. They got that the Torah was what started it all and what we need to be loyal to. And then that's eventually what led to the downfall of the Hashmonaim. Now I want to summarize and then go back to the opening questions. So we opened up with Sefer Maccabim. We said that is where the knowledge of the Hanukkah stories come from. Then we continue on with Megillat Hanuka, which is a very small book written by Hagib ben Artzi, where he makes Sefer Maccabim accessible, and that's where all this information of the Zoom came from. Then we mentioned the city of Modiin, where the rebellion started with the Matityahu refusing to give a korban on the Mizbeach, where there was a huge statue of Zeus. And then we read off what he told his children before he died about, remember Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Eliyahu, Moshe, Daniel, remember all these people, follow God's ways and you'll be successful. Then we mentioned the first battle of 8 of Yehuda Maccabim, which is in Wadi Haramiyah, where the Greek strategy of fighting in a phalanx big was not successful. They were all in a single file line, and the Jews were able to attack them. And then we said that Yehuda took Apollonius' sword, similar to David taking Goliath's sword. Then the next battle we mentioned was Ma'ale Bet Horon, where the Jews were hiding on this hill and they could see the Greeks, which was great because they have an advantage, but then it worked against them when they were so afraid. But Yehuda gave them a great pep talk, and he was quoting Yonatan, Shaul's son's words, and said, God could help us whether we're a lot of people or a few people. And then we continued on to Nabi Samuel. Here's another battle where the Greeks say, okay, we're going to come surprise the Jews. And Yehuda Maccabi has great intelligence. And he leaves. And he goes and he prays in the mitzvah where Shmuel Hanavi prayed. And he connects back to that. And then he goes and he surprises the Greek camp because they're not there. And then as the tents are burning and the Jews won the battle, we have Shabbat coming in and the Jews are able to celebrate Shabbat. Then we have the story of Hanukkah, as we're familiar with the candle and the oils, but the battles don't end there. We can have a happily ever after. We have another battle with Elazar being killed under the elephant. Yehuda Maccabi is eventually killed. Yonatan and Yochanan run away to the caves. Yochanan is killed. And then we have Shimon, who is the last of the Maccabim, who says, we will not give up an inch of Eress Israel. And under Shimon, the Hashmonaim have an independent state. So we open the class by asking, how can our knowledge of history enrich our identities? And some of the things that I think we could gather from all of these battle stories is, one, how connected the Hashmonaim were to their past. We heard in Matityahu's speech, in Yehuda and Shimon's, the acts of courage and bravery of the soul of the Jewish fighters, of their leaders. And that's something that could always stand for us, looking at the map of Israel through the lens of the Hashmonaim battles. And what I think is so significant about this is the second you have the knowledge about where battles with the Hashmonaim took place, all of a sudden you're driving in Israel. And let's pick Modiin, for example. You live in Modiin or you're passing by Modiin. Then you say, the rebellion of the Jews took place here. And in order for the rebellion to start, it means the Jews had to be clear on who they are. And they had a lot of courage and they weren't afraid to stand up for who they were. You could take all of that and you could just ask yourself in your daily life, well, how strong am I and who am I? And do I need courage for what I'm about to encounter? And you could do this anywhere in Israel on so many different levels. And having the knowledge that this happened, it just helps you connect to such a rich history that we have. And we also focused a little bit on the brothers. We spoke mostly about Yehuda. People mostly speak about Yehuda, but we also learned about Shimon, who was the last brother, and Yonatan in the caves, and Elazar, who was killed under the donkey. Yochanan, we only spoke a little bit about. And the last question I want to ask, and this I want to leave you off with, is after learning about how Hashmonaim were connected to the Jewish identity, what is our identity? How connected are we to the Torah? How connected are we to Halakha? And when I ask myself these questions, I don't only think how much Torah do I keep, how many mitzvot do I keep. I also think of Ben Adam Lechavero. My relationships, are there things I need to work on? Do I scream at my siblings too much? Because that's all a part of it. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah and mitzvot, and he wants us to have stellar personalities and work on ourselves and be the best that we can. And that's all a part of it. And I think a great time to ask ourselves these questions is when we are lighting the Hanukkah candles, because we have these incredible battles that bring up these great questions and the personalities of the Maccabim and of the Jews who are fighting for what they believe in. And how do we connect to that? And I think it could be a great thing to discuss with your children, with your families, or even think about yourselves as you light candles. Thank you so much for joining. I love speaking to you always and about Hanukkah. Next week, there is not going to be class because, God willing, I'm getting married next Tuesday and I'm going to be taking a break. I'm not going to give a class the day after my wedding. Thank you all for joining. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you all for joining.
They sent out a message to the women, you know, when you have the list of classes, they put your class down as 11 o'clock. That's why I think you didn't have as many people as usual.
Oh, really? That's so weird that they would change it.
On the SCA list, they have you at 10, but to the women, when they send a list of classes every day, they put down 11 o'clock. I don't know why.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you for telling me. I'll let them know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Adele, that was only today. Usually they have the right time, so they must have, someone must have put it in wrong this time.
Right. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I'm gonna send you all the link now to my wedding. I have it. Whoever I had sent it to that.
We're very excited. Mabruk. We wish you could be there.
Thank you. I wish so too. I really do.
I know Janice is figuring out how to get there. She doesn't want to miss it.
She's found a babysitter for the kids.
Yeah, she was working on the babysitter because it's a drive and she has to go down.